Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is 6 o'clock here in the morning, Calgary, Alberta, Friday morning, August the 20th. I'm happy to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another, and we're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. I have the chat room open if anybody's up and awake and would like to sit in there. And just wanted to finish up looking at an article that we've been looking at all week and regarding rage and shame and the death of love. And it's written by William Cloak, PhD. So I want to finish that up, and it's an interesting article. I've really got a lot out of it, just looking at shame and what is shame and where did the word come from, and it's just a good, interesting article, and especially for adult survivors of child abuse. You know, I thought it was quite interesting to look at because I never really understood that the feelings I was feeling were shame, and I always associated shame with being just something like. You know, you hear people say, "Oh, shame on you," or "Shame on your action," shameful actions, things like this, right? But I didn't really associate it with the way that I was feeling, right? So it's kind of interesting to take a look at it. Some of it I relate to, and some of it I don't. But I just wanted to take a look at it anyway. Next week I want to take a look at toxic shame from John Bradshaw, and he has a great website. It's talking a lot about toxic shame and the dysfunctional family and what happens to children who grow up in that. And so I will be looking at that next week. But I want to finish this article off. So I'm not a counselor. I'm not a professional counselor or therapist. I have no certificates in those areas. I'm a private citizen paying to do my own blog talk shows. And, I always tell people on every show, because it's really important people know this. I'm just a private citizen. I'm a survivor myself. And I've been walking on this journey for a long, long time. And finally, about 3.5 years ago, really was the start of my real healing journey, and that's because I actually sat down and actually took a look at the whole picture of what had happened to me and what had happened to my family, and I started to realize that, I deserve a good life, and I didn't deserve what I went through as a child, and no one does, and I thought, yeah, I've got to get proactive instead of sitting around in a big pile of self-pity and my own pity party all the time. I thought I really have to get proactive and start learning how to help myself, first of all, and learning how to, really getting involved to stop child abuse, which makes me happy. I like doing that. It's really the only thing I could think of doing that meant anything to me as far as what I could spend the rest of my life doing. And that's to get involved and raise my voice. And I thought, who better than somebody who's been there and who knows what it's like for these children out here today who are being abused, right? So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And also, I study human rights, child rights. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. And so I'm always researching and always looking around for information, and but mainly for myself, the One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. This information is very helpful for me as a survivor, right? So I just like to pass it on, and that's why I decided to do these morning shows, just for people who may have been abused as children and may be feeling some of these things. Then they would know that they're not alone, and that we can get help, just whatever kind of help that is, getting a counselor, a therapist, group support, some online group support, which is what I did. Joined a couple of survivor sites for adult survivors of child abuse, and it was very helpful. I haven't had any time to even go back to even be part of these groups. I've been so focused on what I'm doing, but it's just nice to know that they're there and that you can go on even anonymously. You don't even have to participate with your real name. You can use a false name, and just in case you don't want anybody to know who you are, and in those groups, right? So it's really great. It's a great way to be able to reach out to people, and that's what I wanted to do, is just be an encouraging voice for people to realize that, there is help out there and that you have to reach out, because I found out myself that help was never, ever going to come knocking on the door and say, "Hi, I'm help, and I'm here to heal you. I'm here to help you and take away all your pain." And I was wishing for that. Let me tell you, there were years that went by that I was just wishing that somebody could take my pain away. And I didn't really associate it with the fact that I was going to have to do it. I was going to have to be the one to do this. And finally, 3.5 years ago, that's when the realization came. And I thought, man, no one's going to be able to do this but me. I'm going to have to be responsible for my own healing. I'm going to have to be responsible for the way that my life turns out. It's going to have to be me. And so I got really busy, and I just started working on it, and that's what I hope everybody else will do too, and just realize that you're not alone, and that there is help out there, And even calling a crisis line, if you're having a hard time, call a crisis line. Those people quite often are people like you and me, survivors, and they do that because that's what's in their heart. They want to help people, right? So there's a lot of good help out there. So make sure that you do reach out and call someone and talk to someone, or contact someone, and don't suffer in silence and suffer on. I mean, that's terrible. It's a terrible way to be. I know I did it for a long, long time, and so that's why I want to be a voice of encouragement, because about a year ago, almost a year ago now, I started reaching out to really to tell people, look what happened to me. Look, I did not deserve this. And as soon as I started doing that, all these hands came back to me, and they were like, "You are so right. You did not deserve that." And we can do this together. And I have a lot of support, and a lot of these people listen to my blog talk shows, and I thank you very much. And it was very helpful, and I came a long, long way in a year. Let me tell you that. So that's why I just want to be an encouraging voice. So, the topics of abuse are scary and, quite sensitive. So if anybody, if you're uncomfortable with the show, you just turn it off. You have to listen at your own discretion. And if you're a young person under the age of 18, I just ask that you have someone listen to the show with you, an adult, somebody who, a parent or caregiver, somebody in your family who's older who can help you make the decision whether you should be listening or not. There's a lot of adult content on my shows. And so, and I'm fighting to save children's lives with a whole lot of other people out here fighting to help children to stay safe and protect children and save children's lives. I just encourage everyone who's under the age of 18 to make sure that you let somebody know what you're doing online and protect yourself, protect your friends, keep yourself safe. And if you're a really young child, you need to have someone okay it and give you permission to listen to this show, because it's just definitely, it's about stopping child abuse, and it's about child abuse survivors, but it's a lot of adult content. And so the material could be quite scary for young people, especially if they haven't heard a lot about abuse, right? So that's my request there. Thank you very much. So we'll get right on with this, the rest of this article, and you can find this at www.findingstone.com. That's Findingstone, FINDINGSTONE.com, and /professionals, /monographs, /rage, shame, and the death of love.htm. And we left off yesterday at just before rage versus anger, and they were talking about the whole issue that if children imitate their parents, right? And because they're little, that's what they do. That's how they when an infant is developing, right? Their teachers are their parents. So their parents really are everything to that infant, or the caregivers, whoever's looking after that child, right? So it says if a child matures into adult life without coping skills, good modeling of positive adult problem-solving behavior, empathy, or well-developed values, they will eventually come to feel that there is something wrong with them. And all children imitate their parents as a central method in learning to survive. Unfortunately, this identification also includes bad behavior as well as good. So we model our parents' behavior, whether it's good or bad, right? And we can't help it. It's just because whoever raises that infant and raises that infant up, that's the model for that child. And so a lot of the behaviors that we take on as children are direct result from our parents. Right, because obviously we're learning from whoever, or our caregivers, whoever raised us, right? That's who we are going to model. And so I was talking a lot about that yesterday, and then the fact that my behavior was modeled directly after my parents, and a lot of the abuse I suffered was because of it. So in other words, it was okay for them to behave that way, but not me. And so they weren't thinking about the fact that they showed me how to behave. They taught me how to hate. They taught me how to be vindictive. They taught me how to be violent. They taught me how to be mean and nasty and hateful. And that's because that's how they were, right, when I was growing up, especially when I was a little kid, right? That was the worst time. When I got older, they were so old by the time I got old that when I got older, an older teen especially, they were quite old by then, and there wasn't much they could do. They used to fight amongst themselves, my parents, right, fight between each other still, but there wasn't much they could do because of their age, you know what I mean, and the fact that I was a lot older and a lot bigger and a lot stronger, and they really couldn't push me around anymore, especially after the age of 18, because I was just like, I could have left, right? So That's the whole issue. When I was really young, they were at their worst, and so I saw that behavior and I took it on naturally. It wasn't really my fault. So I've had to do a lot of work over the years, to learn to not be like them. And it's taken me a long, long time. It took me periods of years to figure out what my behavior was and try to change it. It wasn't something that happened overnight, and I didn't recognize some of it, and then it was actually shown by other people. Oh, look at your behavior, look what you're doing, and I didn't realize there wasn't really much wrong with it because that's how I grew up. And so, that's why I like to look at this stuff, because it's quite interesting to see. It kind of can give us ideas on sort of how to help ourselves, or what areas that we might want to work on. You know what I mean? It says, identification with a shaming or raging parent creates a raging adult who repeats the same process, often without much control or choice. And that's what happened to my mom. My grandmother was a raging woman, and she raged on her children, and she abused them all. And that my mom was the oldest adult and the oldest child. So my mom took a lot of the abuse on because she did not want her younger siblings to be abused. So she would basically take the punishment for a lot of those younger siblings. And so, because my mom came from a large family as well, I think there were 7 of them. She was the oldest of 7. And so, and my grandmother was a horrible woman, and I have nothing good to say about her. So, she was absolutely horrible. And her dad, my grandfather, I guess, I never met him. He was passed away before I was born. But he was supposedly a nice guy, but he took a lot of abuse from this woman too. So he should have put his foot down and tried to save his children, but he didn't. And I don't know, possibly he was not strong enough, you know what I mean? 'Cause who knows what was going on in his life, but he took the abuse from this woman that he was married to and let her abuse his children. And I can't, it's hard for me to sit there and think about why somebody would do that, but I know in my own family, my parents did not try to protect us from each other. They quite often encouraged the abuse. So, the only time my mom really ever spoke up about any abuse in the home was when my dad was beating on my brothers because because my mom loved her sons. See, so she did not want my dad to hurt her children, right? But she didn't care about us, right? Me and my sister. It was not the girls she was concerned with; it was the boys. And the reason being, I believe, is because her brother, my grandmother, actually killed her own son. My uncle, my mom's brother. She beat him up. He was an older teenager, and she beat him up. She horsewhipped him and then made him sleep in the barn in the winter, and he got pneumonia and he died. And my grandmother caused the death of my uncle. So it was never brought up on any charges or anything like that. But my mother took that extremely hard because it was her brother. And so she, her own mother killed her own brother. And so my mom always kind of felt more love and more concern for her sons than she did for her daughters, probably because of that. So when I take a look back at that, I sort of see why she was the way she was, right? But it's absolutely horrible. So my grandmother taught my mom how to rage, and she taught her how to be that way, right? So that's how my mom taught me, right? The aftermath of a raging incident is intense guilt and is followed by efforts at contrition or, in extreme cases, suicide. So yeah, my mom was not, that was I was talking a little bit about that this week, when my mom would go off and fly off into a rage and, just lose it, right? She wouldn't try to fix it afterwards, right? She wouldn't be sitting around going, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and I didn't mean to hurt you, or I didn't mean to call you that name, I didn't mean to throw this, she would never ever say she was sorry. What she would do is say that she was going to kill herself because we were all so bad. That's what she would do. So I talked about that a little bit. She wouldn't say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I love you, you're my children, and I love you so much." She would never ever do that. She would never gather us around and say, "I love you guys, you're my sons and daughters." We never heard that growing up, you know what I mean? And but we knew we were not wanted, so it was not something like we were expecting to hear that, right? I used to, as a small child, want to hear that from her, but after a while, she was turning me into herself, and I didn't need to be hearing that after a while, right? Then later on, when I got older, I realized how much I did need to hear that, and when she passed away, I realized that I would never ever hear that come from her mouth. And that was very hard on me. It took a year. It took me a year, really, to just try to survive that first year after my mom passed away. I actually had to be on my own, and I needed to do a lot of grieving, right, because I had so much anger and hatred in my heart for what had happened. And then when my mom passed away, it all came out, and I wasn't even capable of being in a relationship at that time. So I spent a whole year on my own trying to work through it, and it was very hard. I wouldn't suggest that for anybody. I just didn't trust anybody, so I didn't go get help, and I should have. But I've been so used to sitting in my own grief and my own pain. Our whole family is. That's why we don't pull together, right? That's why we don't seek help, because we've been so used to this our whole entire lives. And I think this is what happens to a lot of survivors, especially if it's, if someone's had a great life until they turn 12 and then all of a sudden some abuse starts, you notice the difference. So you automatically, you would think, oh my God, this is horrible, right? But when you grow up like that, that's your life. And that's how you deal with things. And that's why I did a lot of drugs. Flat right out. That is exactly why I did a lot of drugs. I had to do drugs to stay sane because the insanity in my home and the way I was brought up, I needed drugs to actually stay sane. So I would not suggest that for anybody. We needed help. We needed serious help. And that's why, but my parents told us that, that therapists and counselors were just going to hurt us, and because they didn't want anybody butting in on their life. They wanted to be able to do what they wanted to do and abuse their family and mistreat each other. And so we were told quite often that, if we go to a counselor or therapist, they'll just use our information against us and they'll just hurt us with it. So we were brainwashed the whole time we grew up, knowing that, it was, we don't want to tell anybody about this stuff because we'll just sit in our own little, safe little dysfunctional world, and we won't tell anybody, and that way we won't get hurt more by it, right? And so that's how, when you grow up like that, then you don't reach out for help, and that's why I'm doing these shows. That's exactly why I'm doing these shows, is because, I wish I would have had somebody tell me a long, long time ago that it's perfectly okay to go out and get some help, you know what I mean? And that, you might run into one or two therapists or counselors that you don't personally relate to, but then you can just make up your own mind to change counselors and change therapists and find one that works for you. I'd never heard all this, right? So this is all relatively new to me, the whole thought of, getting help. So it's very important for people to do that. I wish that my family would have gotten help. I wish my parents would have done what they were supposed to do, which was go to counseling and family counseling and marital counseling and get some help, and the abuse would have stopped and we would have had a great life. And it bothers me that they didn't do that, and that bothers me when people won't try to help themselves and will continue to live a certain way because it's all they know, right? And that's sad because that's a waste of a life, right? We deserve so much better. And it's only going to be us that can make up to make that decision, to take that first step and say, okay, right, I did deserve a better life. I do deserve a better life. I certainly didn't deserve to be abused. So how am I going to fix this? Well, first of all, get some help for whatever issues you've got going on, and realize that there's better days ahead for sure. Got to stay a little bit positive, right? Because even though I do a whole lot of talking about all this negative stuff, in it is the positive realization that we can move past it and we don't have to allow this to kill us. And this is exactly what happened to me 41 years later, after growing up with two people that were not good parents, horrible parents. 41 years later, I finally came to the realization that if I was going to have a good life, it was going to have to be me to do it. There would be nobody else be able to do it for me. And so that was the turning point right there. It's just realizing that I was going to have to be responsible for the rest of my life, and if it turned out really bad, it would be on my own hands because I was going to self-injure. I was always thinking about committing suicide, and just to get out of the pain or just to show the pain. There was many reasons for it. So we have to be really, really proactive and somewhat positive, because if we're going to stay back in that whole negative stuff, then we're going to do exactly what my mom did, which was spend her whole entire life miserable. I mean, my mom, from the time she was born until the time she died, she had a few good times. And I mean, we used to get together and go to people's homes and stuff, like when we'd get invited out and whatnot. And I talked a little bit about that. We'd be, especially when I was young, we'd be told that we were going to go over there and we were going to behave a certain way while we were there, and there was going to be no acting up and nobody was going to be talking about anything. We were just going to be a normal family for an hour or two, right? And when I got older, of course, we were programmed how to do that. So we used to hang around with quite a lot of families And, well, not quite a lot, but I'd say there was 2 families anyway that we sort of hung around with and did stuff with. And my mom did enjoy that. You know, she finally found some friends, and she found some. These people were good to my mom. They loved her very much. They're the people, you know, I talk about a lot when I say that my mom had a lot of support, because she did. These people were also knew that I was being beaten on and did nothing about it. I don't even think they talked to my mom about it and told her to stop beating on me. I think they didn't want to. I think they just ignored it. You know what I mean? And I had talked to them about it, so they knew about it, right? It wasn't something that they would have had to guess. Oh, did she fall down, or did she? I mean, they actually asked me, and then did nothing about it, right? So my mom had a lot of support, but that's what I mean. She did have some good times in her life in that area, but overall, when she was just before she passed away, she was so down and so depressed that she said, you know, her whole life was just garbage. She was married to a man that did not love her. I never ever heard him say one time that he loved her. I never saw him give her flowers. I never saw him buy her anything. He never bought her any birthday presents, no Christmas presents, no nothing. He never would buy her just a gift to come home with and say, I just love my wife. And he would never say, I just love my wife. I love your mother. Or, it was always, your mother's crazy and she's going to kill you and we need to move away. And, you know, my mom, you know, she was in this horrible marriage and she should have got out, and she had many opportunities to get out, but she wouldn't do it. That's what we don't want to do, right? We don't want to have these opportunities out here in front of us to help ourselves and then just let it go by because we're more comfortable in the pain, we're more comfortable in the sorrow, we're more comfortable in the grief. You know, just because we've been there for so long doesn't mean we have to stay there. That's the thing. I mean, I had to do some serious thinking about it because I'm like, man, would I still be the same person if I don't carry around these same feelings of anger and hate and, you know, self-destruction? You know, would I be the same person if I decide that I want to go on and move on and heal and have a good life? Or was it going to take away from something? And I thought, what a joke to be sitting around like that in such, you know, a cloud of darkness all the time, and to think that it wouldn't be better to be out in the sunshine, enjoying myself, you know. But when you grow up like that, it's very psychologically damaging, and it can screw your head right around. And both 2 of my brothers are dead because of it. I really contribute their death to my parents' behavior and the way that they were brought up. And, you know, they as adults had the choice to go get help. My brother was 43 when he had an overdose there, but he had been doing drugs since he was 12 or something. Heavy-duty drug. I mean, I'm talking, he used to pop bags of pills. You know, the guy was just a nightmare. He was a walking nightmare. And he was a nice guy. I loved my brother very much. He was awesome. But he was always so extremely messed up because he would take so many pills and he would just end up in a coma or, you know, overdosing here and there, and lost a lot of brain cells because of it, and, you know, couldn't hold down a full-time job. And, you know, a lot of people say, well, that's his fault. Well, partly, I have to say true, partly, because as an adult he had the choice to get help. And he was even in prison for quite a while, and he could have got help there. He could have probably got some counseling and stuff, but he was so used to sitting around in what he had known his whole entire life, so he didn't want to change it. So he died, right? And so we have the choice, you know. We can change this thing. We don't have to die. I was sitting on the couch at the age of 41 thinking of killing myself again, and I thought, you know, and self-injuring and whatnot, and I thought, and then I snapped, and I'm like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? I'm just doing this because it's normal to me. See, most people, you know, that's not normal to most people. You know, the abuse that we've suffered is not normal to most people, except for, sadly enough, there's so many survivors. 1 out of 3 girls and 1 out of 6 boys will be abused, right? So we know this is a fact. So we know there's a lot of survivors out there. Problem being is that's not what should be the norm. Shouldn't be the norm to be sitting around in these situations. There's help out there, you know, and we, you know, just because it's what we are used to does not mean that we have to stay there. So that's a very important thing for us to remember, that we don't have to stay in that pain. We don't have to stay in this dark place. It is entirely up to us to reach up, lift our hands up to the top of the hole where the edge is, grab a hold of it, and pull ourselves up. And in the meantime, be looking for some hands to help you to pull yourself up. Because we don't have to stay in that hole. You know what I mean? And that's where my mom did. She stayed in that hole her whole entire life, in that darkness, that despair, that complete destruction of her whole soul and her spirit and her mind, just because of the abuse that was put on her and from her mother and my dad. you know. So, and when her children loved her very much, but that was not enough. It wasn't enough, and that's why at the end, you know, I talked about that on my show. You know, I said, "You've got to be kidding. We didn't mean anything to you. It was just not enough for her." You know, she was so wounded. It was absolutely crazy how wounded that woman was. And so we don't want to do that. Like my mom, sadly enough, is a perfect example for me of what not to do. So what I started doing was looking at my parents' behaviors and saying, that is exactly what I do not want to do. I will not follow any of my parents' behaviors because they were sick individuals who would not get help and who still thought to the very end, and my dad still thinks that he's perfect. It's the world that's gone crazy. You know what I mean? But I know that their behavior had nothing to do with love. It had nothing to do with compassion. It had nothing to do with goodness, mercy, you know, truth. It was all just black garbage. Darkness, evil, destruction is what it was. And so we don't have to go that way. We can move on, and we can reach out, and we can get some help, right? It is so important for us. If we're, you know, it's really up to us to take that first step and start out on our healing journey. And so, you know, 3.5 years ago, that's exactly what I did. And I said, no more will I ever think about self-injuring. No more, not ever. I made a pact. I made a deal with myself and God. And I said, I will never, ever have another suicidal thought again. I am done. I'm finished with that. I'm going to live, and I'm going to live as long as I can. And I'm going to try to fight to have a good life and bring as many people with me as I can. And so, you know, that's a huge decision to make for somebody whose whole life has been just nothing but a mess. So I know so many people who have had worse than me. You know what I'm saying? And yet I still look back at my own situation and I think how damaging it was. And I know people who lived through worse. So we can do this, right? That's the big thing. And we have to just remember that we have to hold on. And we have to make the first step every day. Nobody's going to make that step for us. We have to do it. And it's not just one day and that's it. It's every single day. And it's something you have to make within yourself. You know, we all do, right? And I'm not perfect, let me tell you. I mean, I'm still working on a lot of stuff, right? But I'm just saying, every day I made a deal that I was going to get up and I was going to do this, you know, and I'm going to win because I'm like a dog with a bone. I'm like totally determined. All you have to do is say that I can't do something and I will do it because, you know, I'm very much a stubborn person, right? So, you know, that's the whole thing. I mean, I'm fighting every day to do this, right? And you can too. So if you're out there suffering with this, you know, make sure that you do get some help, no matter what it is, you know. Therapist, counselor, good friend, group support. There's all kinds of different avenues and different ways to go about it. But there is some really good help out there. Lots of good people out there that I'm finding just, you know, in this last 3.5 years that are made such an impact in my life, right? So that's why it's so important. So we're going to take a look at this rage and anger. We'll finish this off on Monday, and then I want to start looking at toxic shame because that's really quite something interesting, and I totally relate to it, and I bet you a lot of people do, right? Because so many of us have grown up in these dysfunctional homes or abusive homes, right? Violent homes and whatnot, with toxic parents and toxic siblings and toxic people in our lives, right? So it's so important for people to take a look at this, and I know I'm going to enjoy looking at it. I did already look at the websites and take a look at it already, but I want to really get into it, right? Just start really chatting about it and checking it out. So we have about a minute left. Thanks everybody for being here, and you know, I hope you have a great weekend. I'll be back on again tonight, Dreamcatchers Talk Radio, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with Elizabeth Raleigh, and that's www.blogtalkradio.com/Dreamcatchers. That's where you can catch us at 10 o'clock tonight Eastern Standard Time. And then again, I'll be on my show shortly after that. Child Abuse Prevention and Human Rights Abuse Prevention is up to us. Then there's a couple shows on the weekend you can check out, and you know, then I'll be back next week, one child abuse survivor to another. So take care of yourselves. Leave me a message if you need some resources or information, if there's something I can help you with, you know, or if you just want to say hi. And I'll be on Facebook, and I'll be around this weekend. I plan on hanging out and doing a lot of relaxing and whatnot. So I will be around this weekend if you need to chat. You know, make sure you do reach out, you know. Don't suffer in silence. We deserve so much better. I tell you that. And if that's the only thing I can tell people every single day is that you deserve better, you count, you do matter, then it's worth it to me to be able to do these shows. So thanks a lot, everybody, for being here with me and for me, and I appreciate your support. And I hope you have a great day, and we'll be talking to you again soon. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.